Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode number 279 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Now today we should be listening to a recording of this week's live stream that I had with Gwen, but as you will hear, as we discuss, we had significant technical difficulties, so we ended up having to just trash the whole thing after about 15 minutes of the live stream and start over with just a recorded normal episode. So I apologize for that. We certainly hope that we will get everything straightened out by the next live stream. And I am going to announce the time of that. As you listen, you'll hear that the date was not announced, but the next live stream will be on Monday, March 3rd. The topic is yet to be decided. So if you have a topic that you would like us to discuss, we can go ahead and do that at that time. So be sure to email me. So email me at Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, at andysmom.com with any ideas that you might have for the live stream that night. And hopefully we will get the platform all figured out and be able to do that on at least Facebook, if not Facebook and Instagram. So we will give some things a try and let you know and keep you updated as to the topic for that. And always watch for those questions in the week before so you can come on and answer some of those ahead of time. But right now, just sit back and enjoy listening to Gwen and I talk about the holidays and the recap of this past holiday season. All right. Thank you so much, Gwen, for agreeing to join me on the podcast today.
You're welcome.
So this was supposed to be a live stream. And for the few of you who are listening, when we started doing the live stream, which really wasn't that many, you know that we had horrific technical difficulties. So I was trying to do this several different ways and working on it for, 30, 40 minutes and couldn't really get things to work. So we ended up trying to put Gwen on the phone and having me just go on Facebook Live. And it turns out you were really staticky and extremely hard to hear. And so we ended up having to kind of bag the whole thing and just start over. So I apologize to those of you who are listening, because now you have to wait 2 days for the rest of it. But now we'll get the rest of the story, and you'll get to hear some repeats, because I feel like I need to repeat some things because that really did not work well. So maybe we'll get this figured out by our next time. I hope so. Obviously, we've done the live streams for, a long time now, but as I was explaining on the original time, we used a service called StreamYard, which could have us go to 3 different places at the same time. So we went on Facebook Live and Instagram and Gwen's Facebook, and it all worked lovely until they tripled the cost at the end of the year. And that's just not in the Always Andy's Mom budget because we don't have a lot of income. So because of that, we had to try to go on the cheap here, and turns out going on the cheap does not work well.
Yeah, we'll have to research in between time.
Yes, we'll have to research and see if we can figure out something in the next few weeks. But this week, we were just going to kind of do a holiday recap. So those of you who have watched the last few days, I've posted some questions just to Facebook this time, since that's the only way we were going to broadcast. So I didn't do it to Instagram, so we didn't have quite as many responses. But just reflecting on kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of what this holiday season was like this year. And so we're going to go over some of those comments that we got. And also, I'm just going to share personally how things went for me. So I'm going to let you kind of start and give a little introduction, Gwen.
I thank you. I think sometimes people think we might be torturing them because they survived the holidays. They don't want to go back and talk about them or look at them. It's like it's
Yeah.
done. It's
It's
over. Why are you bringing me back to that space, right? But there's something to be learned in reflection, and I'm going to just share a little bit at the end. Kind of wrap this up. Why I think it's good for us to look back and to say, hey, you know, and we can plan for next year and what what things are harder, what's more difficult, we can learn through this. And so we started with the negative, and I always do that. We start with what was most difficult and we'll end with the positive, right? Because we don't want to leave on the tough note. So our first question was, what was harder than you expected this holiday? And we can kind of tag team and read one. And I think I love the fact that the comment from Dana said, I braced myself for the worst and it wasn't as bad as I thought this year.
Yeah.
And sometimes the anticipation of an event is worse than the actual event. So maybe, like she said, I can imagine just bracing yourself, anticipating that this is not going to go well. And then it wasn't as bad as she thought. So
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and that happens a lot, right? Because I do think the anticipation is oftentimes the very worst thing. So
Yep.
Yeah, so let's just kind of go through some of these. So you mentioned Dana's comment. I'm going to mention a comment from Jill. Jill wrote that watching everyone else feeling joyful and happy was the hardest part for her. And I'm missing half of my heart. When everyone says Happy New Year, I feel nothing happy about it. I'm just into the second year of losing my Colby. Christmas was one of his favorite holidays. Yeah. And that is definitely true. I also think about that Happy New Year that it brings up because, we're focusing a lot on Christmas, but it's really Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's kind of all wrapped up in one. And I honestly feel like in some ways New Year's has been more difficult to me than Christmas, only because it kind of threw me because I did not think New Year's would be as hard as Christmas. But especially that first year, I remember we went out. So the first year we flew out to see my family in Las Vegas. And for New Year's, my cousin who lives in Los Angeles, or was living in Los Angeles at the time, he and his family had left to go on a vacation. So their house was open and it was pretty close to the beach, and they offered their house to us. So the kids and I went there and stayed in their home. And I remember that New Year's Eve, as it passed midnight, Eric and I were laying in bed, and I was just crying. I was just crying because 2019 had come, and Andy was never going to see it. Yeah. And I just did not expect that kind of emotion and feeling with the new year. Like, I dreaded Christmas. I mean, Christmas Eve, we were on an airplane on Christmas Eve when we normally would have been going to church and opening presents and doing all of that stuff. I planned it so we would be on an airplane. So to try to avoid the most horrific times for me, right? But New Year's, I didn't see it coming.
Yeah. I think in one of the other questions coming up, someone says something that New Year's was harder. I can't remember, but I think
somebody did.
said that. And you're absolutely right. It's because here's a year without them in it, or another year, that click of the calendar just is really, really hard. And I don't know that people have as many, I was going to say traditions with New Year's, but we always it's all just a celebration, and there's really nothing to celebrate at that moment. Yeah. Mari wrote, I think it's Mari, reality setting in that my baby girl, Angelina, isn't coming back. She was killed on Christmas Eve morning by a drunk driver, forever 18. The first year I was numb. The second I felt like she was away at school. And the third now is she is not coming back. And she wrote that.
And I loved how she wrote, she isn't coming back, like all in caps.
Yeah.
And I see that for sure. I mean, it is when the reality kind of sets in. It's just not, this is life now.
Yeah.
This is life. This is the way things are going to be. And my child isn't a part of it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
It's so
That
hard.
was a really touching one to me.
Yes, very much so. And I'm sure a lot of other people, because it's that reality that just bites so deeply.
Yeah. And because she's right, the first year, I feel like you're numb. You just don't really believe what's happening. And then every year, it just in some ways gets a little more real until you do hit a point where it starts to get a little easier. And I think I'm going to talk about that later. Some of the things this year that certainly were easier in what's my 6th year, and things I was able to do in my 6th year that I hadn't been able to do before. So it's not like it's going to keep getting harder, but I think for a while it kind of does. It kind of gets worse before it starts to get a little bit better.
Yeah. In a different sort of way. I mean, for those in your first year, you're thinking, how can it get worse? It's a different kind of worse. Yeah.
Yes. I think that's true. That's 100% true. I mean, that's 100%, because I would not go back to that first year.
No.
I would never want to go back to that first one.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there is some sort of kind of numbness to it and a little bit of disbelief. And sometimes my brain wouldn't totally let myself believe quite everything yet.
Right.
And so that starts to, as that numbness starts to wear off and you believe it a little bit more, I think those types of things can be harder. But I wouldn't go back. No way I'd go back. Okay, so Melissa wrote, we usually do Christmas Eve, but since it was during the week, we didn't celebrate our Christmas until the Saturday after, since some of our children live out of town. But if Chelsea was here, she would have spent it with her daddy and I, so not having her here on Christmas Eve. My husband and I just went to bed super early. I just look forward to the holidays being over. We have already been through 5 Christmases without our baby girl, Chelsea. It never gets easier. So that's sad. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can relate to the going to bed early, just wanting the day to be over. If you just go to bed, I can, that this will end and then we can wake up, and you just have this hope that the next day isn't as bad. But with Christmas Eve and Christmas, the next day is still really tough.
Yeah.
It's not like
and especially now, she said they actually did their celebration several days after, so it was like several days of it, right?
Yeah,
it was
right.
It was like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's like 5 days of hard instead of maybe 1 or 2.
For sure. And that's the problem with the holidays, is there's so many days in there. Kelly said, I'm not sure if it was harder than I expected, but hard nonetheless. My son passed away on 11/22/23, one day after his 18th birthday. He was in the middle of my 3 boys. Watching my oldest and youngest trying to have joy in the holidays without their best friend is heart-wrenching. We desperately want our traditions to continue, but no, those won't ever be the same. Honestly, we aren't ready to make new traditions without our Evan just yet. Maybe someday. And that is
an excellent
limbo
point.
Yeah.
I
can't go back to the old. Not ready to do new. So we're just in this.
I know.
Survival.
So what do you do?
Yeah, survive.
But the old is hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think this is where I kind of want to share a little bit. So we have not been home ever since Andy died for Christmas. I've just made this point of we are just going to be gone. So the first year we went out to Las Vegas, like I said, and then to California. And then since that, last year we went to Florida. And then the years in the middle, we were at our cottage up north. So we spent 3 years at the cottage. And we had a little Christmas tree that we can put up at the cottage that we had gotten like at Kmart, like not that I got even before Andy died. And so that's the only tree we really did. And I just wanted to be away, but not really. So this is where I'm kind of going with Kelly on this, because when I had my, our cottage up north, and when my grandmother moved into the nursing home, I got all of her, or not all, but a couple boxes of Christmas decorations that were hers. And so those were the Christmas decorations I put up at the cottage up north. And I have all of mine downstate, the whole Christmas village that Andy loved. We'd put up a tree with all of our family ornaments. I've got family ornaments from when I was a kid because I got those when my mom died. And so there are lots and lots of things, and I had lots of Christmas decorations. So those have been slowly coming back over years, but not really. Like last year, I put a few buildings of the village up. One year we put a tree in the basement because Peter really wanted it, but otherwise there's been no tree. There's been other stuff. And I use an excuse that we're not going to be here at Christmas, right? And I decorate with some of my grandma's stuff up north. And so that's kind of the way that I've been able to, like Kelly said, do some traditions, but not all of them, but also not really do a lot new either. Because sometimes, Andy was alive a few years when we had the cottage. And sometimes what we would do actually is go to church here and then pack everything up and go up to the cottage. So it was not crazy for us to go there because we would do that. It just was kind of done in a little bit of a different way. So this year was different in that we couldn't go to the cottage. Eric only had one day off, so we couldn't go. And because of that, I felt like, well, this is the year that I think I should just put out the Christmas decorations, and we should probably do a tree, and I should kind of just do the whole thing. And I felt kind of stronger. Like maybe I could do it this year. And I asked the kids, do you want to put up the village? Because if they had said no, I would have said no. Because honestly, it was Andy's very favorite thing. It may bother them. I don't know. So I said no. And they just said, we don't care, basically. And put it on me. And then I said, well, I think I want to put it up. And interestingly, we put it up. Peter helped me put it up. And he really got into it. Like he got into it like Andy used to get into it. And he is putting like little snow between the buildings with the cotton and getting the cars all lined up on there. Because I've got a lot of stuff. I mean, it's like a road and cars. It's got street lights. It's got everything. And honestly, none of this has ever been put up all together because every year I would get new things. And so then they couldn't really go up that year, right? Because the whole village is set up. So they would go up the next year. Well, it's never been all together, right? Because the newest buildings, the newest things didn't get to go up. So we did it and we got done. And Peter turned to me and said, I'm so glad we did this. And it made me realize, that I think he probably had wanted it for a while and just hadn't said it. Or maybe he hadn't. He didn't realize how much he missed it and how much he wanted it. But it made me really happy to have done that. So even though it was hard to do, we did. And then we went out and bought a Christmas tree and put it in our front living room in front of the window, just like we used to. And that day, it was hard. I mean, getting the tree was hard. I cried getting this tree because we haven't done it, because the only other time we had a tree, somebody just brought it. So I didn't have to go pick it out. And I used to, when I picked out trees, like we would have to look at about 50 trees before I was okay with a tree. And this time I was like, I don't know, it was probably, I just went through it. I think it took me about 45 seconds. Like, let's just go that way.
Yeah.
So I couldn't, really do that, but I did. And then we got it home, and then I had to go do, it was 2 days later. Like, we didn't do the decorations right away. I just couldn't do it. And 2 days later, I'm doing my support group, my Starlight support group, the evening one, and I'm talking to them about how I got the tree because they knew it was like a big deal for me to get the tree. And I said, now I've got to like put lights on it and decide what decorations to do, whether to do the family ones or what to do. And when I was in that, in my meeting, Eric put the lights on and put the ornaments on, just the generic ones that I got from Hobby Lobby a couple years ago. And so he put those up. And then I went downstairs and I put up, 2 or 3 that I had that were out a little more. And then I put up we had a little choir boy.
Mm-hmm.
So I just put up the choir boy for Andy. So it just was basically a Hobby Lobby ornaments, like a pine cone thing, something else, and then the choir boy. And because I just kept kind of going back and forth. I made up my mind I was going to do it, and I was going to get them all out, the family ones, the ones with Andy's name on it, the ones that he had made, and all the kids, and then I just didn't. So, but I did a lot, right? We did a lot.
You did. Yeah, you also told me you did the baking, some cookies.
Yeah,
and
we baked
things.
cookies and
you went 0 to 100, I said, from, not doing anything for 5 years. And then on year 6, you accomplished a lot.
Yeah, I did a lot. I just felt like I was maybe strong enough to do it.
Yeah.
So, even though I cried a lot.
Right.
I mean, I
and that
certainly
doesn't
cried
mean
a
you're
lot.
not strong. Right. Right.
No, I mean, I didn't do it without emotion.
Right.
But I did. And
and some joy, like seeing Peter's face and seeing
oh my gosh. I mean, right. I was so glad, right? I'm so glad we got the tree. I'm so glad that we did those things,
Yeah.
And, I put up the nativity set that I bought with my grandmother. And like, there were a lot of things that there's this Christmas tree that my grandpa made. I mean, parts of my childhood I was able to kind of do again that I hadn't. Right. And yeah. So anyway, that felt really good. And then also, and this goes with another comment that we talked about on the live stream that Mary Pat wrote in, that the toughest part that she thought about Christmas was the music.
Yeah.
The music is always hard, but this year she said she had to walk out of church because it was so hard. And I would totally agree with that, because probably the hardest part of Christmas ended up being going to church, because we hadn't done that at our church. We had, I went to church in Florida last year. The first year we didn't go to church because we were on an airplane. The other years, I feel like we maybe went to church up north in 2019 or 2019. And then 20, 21, 22, those were all online. So we could just go online from the couch up north and not have as much, right? And I don't think, for me, the music does not affect me watching church online.
I agree.
As it is when you're there. So we get to church. It's like 15, 20 minutes early. I think it's plenty early enough to get a seat. And it was, because the whole balcony was open. But I was saying on the live stream, I did not want to go on the balcony, because every time we had to go in the sanctuary. So we have a contemporary worship service that's in a different part of the building. That's the one I usually am in. That's the one I sing in the band. That's the one we normally go to. But there's other sanctuary. In the sanctuary, we have church for Christmas, Easter, and then actually in the months after Andy's death, everything was in the sanctuary because we were doing a remodel of the church. So for several weeks after Andy died, we would go to church every week, because I was bound and determined I was going to church, because I was so terrified that if I quit going to church, I'd never go back. So we went every week. I cried, and we sat in that balcony. because I didn't want anybody to see me.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get to church, there's like no one in the balcony, like one family or something. But I did not want to go on the balcony because the balcony just reminds me of Andy. And, you know, the first Easter after Andy died, it was his birthday and I was in the balcony and I actually had to go downstairs in the bathroom. I even threw up in the middle of the service. Like, it was awful. So, like, we are not going to the balcony. So the only available row for 4 people was the front pew. So I went in the front pew and I thought, I wasn't happy about it because I thought if I get upset and emotional, like, everyone will be able to see me up here in the front row, but whatever. It will be okay. And it's the opposite side. Obviously, when Andy died, we were also in the front pew, but we were on the opposite side of the church. So I thought it was going to be okay. And it turns out it was not. It was not okay because the whole time I'm like listening to this music and I'm watching, they have a brass quartet and they have a French horn, which Andy played the French horn. They have trumpeters, which Peter played the trumpet with them. I mean, it's hard. They had the choir. That always reminds me of Andy. And then I'm sitting in the front row staring at the space where his casket was in the funeral. And I just can't, like, not see this stupid empty space where that casket was. I just, like, so anyway, I just cried the whole time. My daughter kept holding my hand. I just kept crying. At the end, we walked out, and I turned to Eric, and I said, I just couldn't unsee that casket. I just, and all this music, and then they did Away in the Manger, and which is, you know, of course, if you listen to the end of this podcast, you'll hear Andy singing the 3rd verse of Away in a Manger, and it just was too much. It just was too much. Yeah. So it was really hard. But I agree with Mary Pat, and I have to say, I was sitting there like it was so bad, and like I just want to leave, but I'm in this stupid front row, in the middle of the front row. I can't like leave, so I just sat there and cried and tried not to move my body too much, so hopefully people didn't notice how badly I was crying. You know.
Were you able to recover after that and do anything when you got home, or did you go to bed?
Oh yeah, I mean I was, Which you're right. I mean, I can see where you're going with this. Where you're going with this is I need to celebrate that, right?
Well,
that the whole night wasn't totally ruined.
Right. I think that people need to hear, like, maybe recovery in the early days takes longer, but your recovery, your bounce back is a little different when you're 6 years out. And so I just wanted you to speak into that. Like, were you able to go home?
And I think, and I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that later when we talk about some of the more positive things.
Okay.
Because I think things did get positive, but I didn't just want to relate that was hard. Yeah. It was really hard.
Oh, yes. That was
and
very...
I just didn't. It's so funny because, like, why? I just felt so much stronger, right? I mean, I did so much stuff, and we're going to go to church, and it's going to be all fine, and...
Well... You know, I'm thinking, did your mind or your heart trick you because you had done a lot of hard things that you just kind of go, oh, I can do that? I mean, you know, it's interesting. I totally not related to grief, but, you know, I just had my knee replaced 3 weeks ago or the week before Christmas. And I'm getting much better and stronger. It's my second knee. I know what to do. I'm doing my exercises. I trick myself into things I think I can do. And then I do it and I'm like, oh, crap, I just had knee replacement. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so,
I think that's a great analogy.
That for
Absolutely
you're
perfect.
Oh, I get all that. Oh,
yeah, I did all that.
Yeah. And then you go, oh,
I put up every single village of that building, right? I'm like that. I thought was going to be the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And I
you
did
go, I'm
that.
still wounded.
And I did that. And I didn't even cry. Like, I didn't even cry putting up the village. And I mean, part of it was just looking at Peter and the kind of the joy that he got from putting it up and us organizing it and all of that. It just wasn't sad. It wasn't a sad experience. Yeah. And it's the first time that it wasn't, because even last year when I put up just kind of a handful of buildings, I like cried through the whole thing doing it. I mean, it was not good. Right. But this year I did it much more easily. And I just did not, honestly, I just didn't think church would be as hard.
Right. Yeah. You weren't prepared. You hadn't braced yourself for that one.
I know.
Yeah.
I hadn't.
We have one more comment on the difficulty. Alexis wrote, "This was the second Christmas for us. I feel like the fact that hardly any of our family acknowledged the hard or brought up Elijah's name. It brought some bitterness that I had to deal with. You just feel so isolated sometimes." Oh,
Yeah.
that's so, so true. It's not so much the pain that you're carrying, but the fact that no one acknowledges that you have pain. So it's
Yeah.
a secret, or you're supposed to hide it, and you have to isolate because you go, you don't understand me.
Right.
Yeah, and people don't realize.
And I
the
think it's
importance.
really funny too, because it would be very interesting to me if you talked to the family members, because you wonder if it really was that they weren't thinking about Elijah, or if they were like, man, I can't bring up Elijah because, you know, Alexis will get upset or whatever, right? It might be that it was, they felt like it was protecting the rest of the family by not bringing up Elijah, but really it ends up being very hurtful when you don't bring it up.
Oh yeah.
And I do think sometimes it's just not what people think. They just think that they should avoid it because they don't want to see you cry and they don't want to see you upset. But overall, it is way more upsetting to not have it mentioned.
Right. Oh, so much so. So I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate to her comment for sure. The next question was, what was easier, more enjoyable, tolerable than you expected over the holidays? And Carolyn wrote, every year what's hard for me changes. I think that's like what happened to you. This year it was decorating the Christmas tree without Jimmy. I had a good cry and I called it my holiday cry.
Yes.
You just
I love that. I love that. And she's so, so true in that it changes all the time. And things you think are going to be okay or not. And then, you know, and then it's just the opposite. I love that.
Yeah. Do you see Dana's comment, or do you want me to keep going with some of these?
I can do Dana's. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For some reason, she said, I felt content this year on Christmas morning. We do something called Best Christmas Ever every year since Brogan died. We usually gift one family. This year, we were able to bless 4 families. I do it to honor Brogan. Maybe doing 4 families in his honor helped me feel content. Of course, looking back now and saying that comes with guilt. And then she wrote, New Year's was different this year, too. If I make it until midnight, I find myself getting very angry at about 11:40 p.m. Angry because I don't want to start another year without him. I didn't even notice until New Year's Day that I didn't get angry this year.
Wow.
I mean, those are such, you know, nice things to celebrate, right?
Progress. Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're not even aware. It even healing or contentment, or some of the words she used. I think contentment was her word.
Yes.
Not being angry, that it catches us unaware. We don't realize it until in reflection you go, maybe she wouldn't have even, well, it took her till New Year's Day. She did realize that she didn't get angry, but those are big. Yeah.
Yeah, those are big. And I love the feeling of contentment too. But it's too bad she's looking back and feeling guilty, because I don't think it's something to feel guilty about. But, you know,
can't help it.
It is what
Mom
it is.
guilt is real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mary Pat says, my son has 2 cousins that are his age, and we called them the 3 amigos. This Christmas, I saw them together without Ben and survived. I mean, yeah.
And you know what? That's just a check, right?
Yeah.
You survived it. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to come back to that, to the check.
Okay.
I want to come back to that. Okay.
Melissa wrote, having some of our children and grandchildren here, 2 of our grandchildren that haven't been able to be with us during the holidays in years. We're here this year. No big crowds. I did make cookies with one of my daughters and her in-laws. I also made cookies with one of Chelsea's best friends. Christmas morning, I made breakfast for 2 of Chelsea's EMT friends that were on duty and took it to them. These are things I enjoyed.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, those are beautiful.
Yeah. And honoring her and her friends and the work that there's so much in that has value for for her from Melissa. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This was the one comment that I remember reading when you were talking about New Year's.
Yeah.
Samantha said, New Year's was actually harder for me than Christmas. Ringing in a new year, my sweet boy will never see, breaks me into pieces.
Yeah. That's what we had talked about earlier.
Yep.
And then Samantha also wrote that seeing her parents was easier than expected, but still hard. So, that's a nice little thing too.
Yeah.
And then Missy wrote, going to our family's Christmases. It still feels weird, but it didn't hurt as bad this year as seeing others with their whole family, their whole families. And that's something to celebrate, because it is hard to see the rest of the family when they come as whole family units when you are a broken one.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, those are, things that were tolerable. We're not saying, oh, these were full of joy every moment, but they were tolerable and surviving. And some of the words that we use just, they are something to acknowledge and reflect on. I just love that, taking the time that they wrote that and thought about it.
Well, and now I want to go back to me a little bit too. So, we talked about Christmas Eve, and that was hard. And so what is our family tradition? And it's been my family tradition from when I was a little kid, is that we would go to church and then we come home and open presents. And actually, when I was a kid, and I did this when my kids too, inexplicably, my mother would forget her purse in the house every year when we had to leave for church. So she always had to run back in the house. But it turns out what she was doing was leaving the presents from Santa, because Santa came to our house when we were at church. Because always we lived close enough that we would go Christmas morning to grandparents to spend family Christmases. So that was our personal family Christmas, was always Christmas Eve. And so we always did Christmas presents on Christmas Eve after church. So as kind of normal tradition. So even though I was like a hot mess all through church and cried all through church, I came back and we opened our gifts like normal. And honestly, it really was good. I mean, it really was enjoyable. We had kind of a fun thing because my foster son Valeriano just passed his test for U.S. citizenship, and he's actually having his swearing-in ceremony tomorrow morning, so that's all very exciting. But because of that, we had, he wanted like a laptop for Christmas, so I got him a laptop. But for his other gifts were all like American related. So, my son got him a tie with American flags on it. I got him some socks. I'm a new American citizen. I got him a really fun coffee cup that says, "Relax, gringo. I'm an American citizen," with the flag on it. It was super funny. My husband bought him a big flagpole and an American flag to put out in front of his house. I mean, we had a really, really fun time with that. And that, knowing that, every few gifts he was going to get to open one of his fun American citizen gifts was kind of just cool, and it made that gift opening really okay. I mean, and not just okay, like fun. I mean, we had a good time with it, and it wasn't just something I had to kind of grin and bear it and get through. It was good. And considering how, like just an hour before that, I felt like I was
at his
horrible.
Funeral. Yeah.
That I was able to really have a fun time with the family then. I mean, that's something to celebrate.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, and not just more enjoyable or tolerable, but fun. It was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so refreshing and nice to have, but it doesn't mean that you didn't experience the pain that you felt. But like we said, the bounce back, the able to find joy and fun in things. And that's been a long time coming. Like this, for new listeners and newly bereaved people, this is not your first, this is your sixth rodeo at surviving the holidays. And so, that's awesome. So the last question was, now I can't remember. Moments
I can read
peace that you experienced.
Yeah. Were there any moments of peace that you experienced over the past holiday season?
And Carolyn said, I felt more peace as I am becoming used to including Jimmy spiritually, not seeing him physically. Not seeing him physically. It's a big hurdle.
It is a big hurdle.
It
Mhm.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and Melissa wrote, I probably had more peace than in a long time. Even though it felt very lonely at times, there were some peaceful times. So
Mm,
that was
love
that was
that.
cool too.
Yeah. Samantha said, in my husband's culture, you plate food for your loved ones. And so we did that for our son, made him a bowl and put it next to his urn. It gave me some sliver of peace. I miss Raiden so much.
Oh my goodness, there's so much here with that. I love
Yeah.
that one. I
Mm-hmm.
love that they did that and anyway, I think that that's cool to have some of those kind of ritual
Yeah.
things that you can do that can bring you a bit of peace.
Right. Well, and it's awesome that it's part of their culture. And then some of
Yeah.
us, as you know, someone else had mentioned about not even saying the name, that we have our stuffy culture that says, well, let's just not go any place difficult. Let's not talk about it. If we pretend, we don't
Yeah.
say anything. So I just love that it's just built in, and they didn't have to raise their hand and go, can we do this, because it means a lot to me. Like some people probably had to do this holiday, say this is important to me. It's just part of their culture to acknowledge this person lived and they're a part of us, and hey, let's get them a plate of food.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Well,
yeah.
and I have to mention something that my daughter did, which was super cool. So she does knitting. I mean, she was a couple years ago, she was really doing a lot of knitting, but she decided to knit her brother a blanket. And
Oh.
they were all colors of green. So her favorite color is like teal, and Andy's favorite color is a bright green, and Peter's also different kinds of green. And so she took those three colors and made a blanket to represent the three of them for Peter to have at school.
Oh, that's
And
so beautiful.
so, talking about the idea of peace,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that was her way of giving Peter a little bit of them to have at
Mm-hmm.
school to give him a little bit of
Yeah.
peace.
Yeah. And it's got to give you some level of warmth and peace. I'm kind of spinning off of the blanket thing, but that they are acknowledging too, and that they're carrying it on, and that they could say Andy's
Yeah.
name and his favorite color. And it's not just the two of them, it's still the three, right?
Yeah, and I feel like too, I mean, she's gone through so much these
Mm-hmm.
last few years. I mean, she had to leave school for quite a while. She's been home. Now she's out. She's at school. She commuted for a semester and she moved out. So that's probably worth
Wow.
discussing, the fact that Eric and I are truly empty nesters now for the first
Oh,
time. But I think in I can see in her healing so much more of a willingness to talk about Andy that
oh,
she was unable to do when things were bad.
yeah, right. Well, here's another thing, Mom, and I've said this before, and you might not remember it from before, but you're getting better. So she's able to take the risk to do some of that. when
Yeah.
when kids, they want to protect their parents or wonder, they need to make sure you're going to survive before they can bring up and maybe acknowledge some of their stuff too. So that's just a real healing moment for both of you, that she
Yeah, that she
knows
feels
that
more
you're
free
okay with it. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
say it. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love that.
that's likely true too.
um Yeah, I want to read Mary Pat's, because I have something to add
Yeah.
to it. She said, our family went out of town for Christmas, and it felt peaceful that we didn't even have to acknowledge that it was Christmas at all.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that as a survival tip. Like sometimes you just want to go away and pretend. But
Yeah.
I have this funny story of a woman who, it was not her child who died. They didn't have any children. It was just her and her husband. And her first Christmas without him, she said, I have to go somewhere where there's just no Christmas, and I want to be gone a long time. So she booked a cruise through the Panama Canal. It was like a 20 some day cruise. So she was going to be gone all of the holidays and just be able to be on this cruise ship. So
Uh
that
huh.
worked for her. She didn't have to acknowledge it at all. And I saw her after and asked, like I am, we are tonight, how did it go? And she said, Gwen, there wasn't even a poinsettia on that cruise ship. Like there was nothing about the holidays. So after the fact, she missed the fact
Yeah.
that there was nothing. So I've always laughed about that. Like we think we don't want it, but I love the fact that she said, and we didn't even have to acknowledge. So that worked for them wherever they went, whatever they did, they didn't have to acknowledge. Yeah.
That was like us. I went to Las Vegas, obviously, because I had family in Las Vegas, but I knew too, they went out there like, there's no snow. There's no.
Oh, right. Yes, it's a completely different environment.
It's the desert. It's not going to feel like Christmas, even though it's Christmas and they put up a tree and they do all this stuff and they try to make it feel Christmassy. It is not like Michigan Christmas, you know?
Yes,
so
very much. A cactus is different than a snow-covered.
It is
yeah.
very different.
I love that. So we've kind of completed the question. And one of the things that I wanted to come to is the fact that, do you treat or reward yourself for surviving? Or not just surviving, a lot of people thrived or for having some joyful times or peaceful times. It's so interesting to me that, again, people don't acknowledge the fact that you did hard things. Like, I want to celebrate that. So have people do that. And it was interesting because just before I got onto this call, I was expecting an invite from you via Facebook. So I was on Facebook. Right. And someone on my feed today is celebrating 100 days sober. And I'm not kidding. The comments and the congratulations and you go girl. And she said, I'm celebrating with pizza. There might even be balloons. And I started to think, did any of our viewers say, I survived and put it out on Facebook and let people say, you go girl, you did it.
No.
I know. And it's like,
right. I mean, taking nothing away from the 100 Days Sober, which is amazing.
No, right. Exactly.
Exactly. But you're right. I mean, you would never like, I mean, there's probably a decent chance that I knew on the 100 days after Andy was died. I mean, there's probably a decent chance I counted that and knew when day 100 hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you really could have posted something like that.
Yeah.
Like, Andy died 100 days ago and I'm still here. I'm still surviving. I'm still doing stuff. And no one would have said, congratulations, that was really hard. You've done hard things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They wouldn't have done that. It would have like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But really, it is something to kind of celebrate when you when you go through something that's hard.
Yeah, we've been preparing for this. We've been bracing ourselves, like Dana said, we're just hanging on. How are we going to do this? What is it going to be like? Who's going to, and you made it through. And you had hard times, but you had peace and contentment too. And let's just say, yay. Yeah, I did that. So I don't know if people, after they listen to it or how they comment again. We can't have live chats right now, but just
I know we can't. This is so weird, right?
I know.
Us doing this.
I'm so
not
used
having any
to
live
interaction.
Chats. I know. I am used to interaction too. It's really bothering me.
So
I've got to find some sort of service that I can afford.
But that people can write. Just maybe, I'm gonna treat myself to, something, a massage or something that says I did that. And so I think we need to celebrate those because the world doesn't. And I always say that, bereaved people, your neighbors, when you get up and go to work every day, they don't stand on the curb and go, great job, you're up again today, you're doing it. They just
I know.
So I that's a big part of my job that I love is to be able to encourage people in that. So I just want to, leave on that note of encouraging the listeners that it was hard. And we're acknowledging
I should, since we're talking about me not being able to afford anything, I do have to thank some people for donating since our last podcast. So we have Mary that donated to the campaign in memory of Zach, and she was on the podcast not too long ago. Mm-hmm. And Tracy donated in honor of Taylor. And Andrea's been on the podcast before, to Andrea's Taylor's mom. And Sonia also made a donation in honor of her grandson, but also because of her daughter Brittany who I know well and who's been in some groups with me. So anyway, thank you to those 3 people who have donated in the last couple of months since our last live stream. So I appreciate that. And if you feel the desire to donate to the podcast, you can do that through GiveButter. You can go to our website and click on it. You can donate, I guess, via Venmo. I found out that we have a Venmo account. If somebody tries it, let me know if it doesn't work, because no one's ever used it, but maybe.
Yeah. And if any of the listeners know of a platform we could use that doesn't cost as much, maybe they could share it with us.
Yes, because that would be great if we could.
It might
do
be a little more
again.
technical than us. Yeah.
Yes, because clearly we are not technical.
We
are not tech savvy at all, and we have no idea. Clearly, I have no idea what I'm doing. I thought, oh, this is going to be great. There's that button on there on Zoom. It's share to Facebook. This will totally work. And maybe I can just get that to work. If I can get that to work next time, wonderful. Yeah. So, but that will take, I think, me and Eric and doing some practice. So you may see me just doing practice ones with Eric sometime to just see if it works. Obviously, I should have done that, but I was on vacation all last week, and so this was me trying to do too much in too little time, which I am forever guilty of, trying to do too much in too little time. So anyway, and like you said, we've done like 40 of these together, and this is the first time we've totally screwed up and had technical difficulties. So hopefully people will have a little bit of grace for us.
They do. I've gotten a few texts. I know you have too, but I got one that someone just said, don't worry about it. Technical difficulties, they'll all get ironed out. It's fine. So that was sweet. Hang in there. Yeah, which was nice.
Well, and those people who go on now, because there's 15 minutes of people hearing me and apparently a crackly you. So they know to listen to the podcast this week, and we'll get it up. So it'll be fine. Right. And I'll post this whole thing on Facebook on Thursday. So not the video portion, the crackly one, but the audio. So all right. Well, I appreciate it, and I have no idea what we're talking about next time. But we will figure that out, and I'll put it on our calendar.
And if anyone has ideas again. Yeah,
what?
If anyone has ideas.
Yes, if anyone has ideas, that would be great.
That's helped us in the past.
I think, let's see, when's it going to be? I think, hopefully, I haven't okayed this with you, but hopefully it's going to be about the first week of March. So we will talk about that after we go off the air and get that planned. But
sounds great.
Looking forward to that. So thank you.
All right. Take care.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation. Or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.